what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football, and welcome back to the Winning Drive. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers, pleased to be joined by fellow lifetime Longhorn C.J. Vogel, the young prodigy. Also joined by our own coach, former high school football coach at Bernie, Capel, Brownwood, Belton, Rotan. Also played college football at Abilene Christian, coached there as well, and was on the staff at the University of Texas for multiple head football coaches. And now you can catch his work at ShipleyRanches.com. It's our own Coach Bob Shipley. What's going on, Coach? How you doing?
Beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Oh, it's a great time.
How many people you think get that reference? Does CJ get the reference?
I don't know. I watched when I was little. I don't know.
CJ, do you
I know
get
Mr.
the
Rogers.
Oh, there you go. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Hey, but the funniest Mr. Rogers, the funniest one is
Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy. That's the best one ever.
I already knew where you were going. I was like, oh, yeah. You gotta be coming.
Yeah, like, let's go, children. Here comes Mr. Policeman.
No, that was. I knew where you were going with that.
He might be looking for me for what I did last night after the show.
Oh man, see, love it. That's why Coach is the real MVP of the show. Actually, he's one of our MVPs because Matthew is the one behind the scenes doing the real work. We appreciate him and appreciate you guys for joining us as well. No matter where you're joining us from, we appreciate it. But you know how it works, guys. It's the Winning Drive, but you guys drive the show any direction you want to go. Super chats jump to the front of the line. You can interrupt the show at any time. Yet go Texas softball.
Yeah, Mr. Robinson's
neighborhood. That's it
right there, Mr. Robinson.
That was it. And of course, you guys throw out your questions, comments. We'll try to address as many of them as we can. So we appreciate all you guys for joining us. We'll dive into a few topics on the show today. I got a few things I want to get into. There's already a 2026 big board out for Pro Football Focus. I think we can get into that a little bit. President Trump did. There have been several reports. We talked about them. There was one report that after Nick Saban had a conversation with President Trump that he was going to basically think about actually signing an executive order to look at the predicament of college sports. Now I believe that energy has shifted to a committee or a commission that is going to be looked at. That's going to be looking at the predicament of college sports, and we'll talk about who's going to head that committee, that commission, because that looks to be already something that is already underway. Looks like that is something that's going to come to fruition, and we'll give you some of the details and talk about that coming up a little bit later on. All right, we'll also dive into some. I want to talk about some Texas football related topics. I was doing some research about the NFL draft and some of the streaks that the Longhorns have in the NFL draft, and the most impressive streak that the current Longhorns have going as it relates to their NFL draft status. So we'll talk about that coming up a little bit later on the show. But first, let's talk recruiting because CJ was hard at work. He was on the road and actually got a chance to get eyes on some of the top prospects that the Longhorns have been interested in. Give us the details. Give us the skinny on it, CJ. What did you get eyes on, and what did you see?
Yeah, it started down at Georgetown Eastview. Went to see linebacker Tyson Ajayiwoko, currently committed to Texas Tech. Just recently had knee surgery and has yet to really hear from the Texas staff. He has an official visit scheduled for June 13th to Texas, though I'm kind of up in the air on whether or not that will happen or not. That was, of course, starting down in Austin, went up 35 after Georgetown, made it to Panther Creek in Frisco. That's an awesome school, by the way, right by the PGA of America's headquarters. Hadn't been out there before, but that's a beautiful area, a lot of golf. But that's home of Jalen Lott, who I got to see a lot of, and we got some highlights here. Matthew, if you don't mind, playing corner, playing nickel, playing wide receiver. Here he is at cornerback, unbelievable athlete. He just got the silver medal in the high jump and the long jump at the state UIL track meet as well. Here he is against Donovan Webb, one of the top safeties in the country, and he just soars. Like, it's unbelievable how athletic this kid is. Really talented football player. He's quick, he's fast, he's fluid. He's got great hands. Georgia, Miami coaches were both out in attendance as well. He's got about 6 official visits set up. Oregon, Ohio State, LSU. I mentioned Miami, Texas. I mean, the list goes on. He already took an official visit over to Colorado as well. But Texas certainly in the mix. His sister goes to USC. but his father, of course, was a big athlete at Texas, was in the Hall of Honor for track and for football as well. But yeah, really talented football player right here. Probably, I'll go ahead and say it, probably my favorite prospect in this cycle for the in-state crop. But really talented. Texas certainly in the mix. And of course, he'll be back down to Texas for his official visit later on in June. And then today I was over in Crowley, and I'll be making the trip back to Crowley. That's a fun drive. Right? From Allen to Crowley. No, not one bit. But I was at North Crowley High School earlier today to go see 5-star John Turntime in action. Freakish athlete. I know that there's some talk about how heavy he is. He's about 275, 270 in that range. He's playing left tackle here. But he just moves bodies. And I think that's all that matters, right? And Coach, you could talk about it when you look at it from an offensive line perspective. If you got the technique and the power, the weight, when it comes eventually, it's just going to magnify what you've already got as your baseline. But 4 schools right now standing out for Turntime, who's got 4 official visits set up. That's Tennessee, Michigan, Texas, and Texas A&M. He said he's got a pretty good idea of a final 3, essentially. Texas firmly in the mix. He said Coach Flood stopped by last week, has made him feel like a priority throughout the process. That remains the case. And right now, that official visit the last week of June, it might lead up to potentially the last official visit that he takes before what he said could be a decision come July 4th. So both of those guys.
What's his weight? What does he weigh right now?
He's about 6'4", 275 right now, Coach.
Yeah. He moves really well. He moves really well.
Coach, would you move him to guard? When he got
at 6'4", I probably would.
Yeah.
Yeah. At 6'4", I probably would, but he doesn't look like he weighs that much. He looks like he moves like he weighs about 230.
Yes.
Which those are the guys I used to have to recruit at the Division II level. The guys are 6'4", 6'5", like 220. And then you recruit them and develop them and let them grow into their frame. But this guy's already 270, 275. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, he runs like a tight end, looks like to me.
Yeah. Freaky athlete. Again, another 5-star guy. And to go back to Lott and Turntime, both mentioned possible decisions July 4th. So a lot coming down in the next 2 months. What is it, about 60 days or so until then. But Turntime, Coach, Texas recruiting as a tackle right now, one of the top tackles on the board. A lot of schools have had that conversation, kind of like what we had with Kelvin Banks. Is he a guard? Is at the next level? Is he a tackle? Then you see him moving, you're like, I like the length. I like the athleticism at the outside. That's kind of the conversation right now with Turntime, but certainly, a fun prospect to watch in practice. No doubt about that.
Yeah, no, he is. His footwork, because he just looks so light on his feet for a big dude. But be interesting to see how long it takes him to put on weight and put on mass at the college level. Because if he's going to play in tackle or guard, it doesn't matter. 276, they got to get him up to 300, something like that. Looks like he can easily put that on and still keep that fluidity as a player. Let me ask you about Jalen Lott real quick, though. I love how his at the catch point, no matter if he's at DB or wide receiver, he's the same type of player at the catch point. He's just attacking the football at his highest point, which is just kind of freaky to me. But you've obviously you probably got a chance to look at him and watch him up close and personal. What are do you think he's a better wide receiver or a corner? Like you've been doing this, scouting guys and seeing them at the next level. What are your thoughts? Do you think he's a corner or wide receiver?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question for Jalen Lott. Look, do you want him as a corner? Do you want him as a wide receiver? I saw him very early on. Like my first impression of him at Lovejoy was a wide receiver, and he was on the freshman team as a freshman, obviously, and he was just making one-handed catches, kind of just jogging his routes, making the average freshman look really silly. And that's kind of my impression was, okay, give him 3 years, kind of finesse some of those routes, kind of clean it up in the route tree, you're going to have a freaky athlete. And then I saw him play corner his sophomore year against that room of a Dalen McCutcheon, a Parker Livingstone, a Jackson Lavender. I mean, just all sorts of Division I guys. And I said, wait, it's pretty darn good this way too. But Rod, I think that there's a next level of explosion, if you will, with the ball in his hands. And I do think he would be just fine as a corner, but his hands, I mean, I think you'd be wasting in a way a great set of hands with a guy with a freakish burst and acceleration off the line. I also side offensively a little bit more, but I think that there's a higher ceiling with that than defensively at corner.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't really seen him much as a ball carrier with the ball in his hands, but as a receiver, I mean, these days, I fully understand why he wants to play receiver.
Prime return guy too.
Okay. Yeah. Also something, that's another added value with a guy like that. I get it. You play defense, you can still return. As a defense, like you can't be a return guy as a defensive guy. All right. That's something else that's kind of going away. Remember back in the day, a lot of defensive guys would be return guys. You don't see that as much anymore either. So I'm not, I'm not opposed to that. If he comes to Texas, letting him be, a defender and also a return guy, if he has that itch to have the ball in his hands. But I get it. Guys want to play offense, fantasy football. It's all about offense. And all the ladies want to talk about the dudes scoring touchdowns. I get it. All right, let's thank our first sponsor before we move on and dive into some other topics of the day. Let's thank our friends over at Flat Creek Estate Winery. Flat Creek Estate Winery, folks, just minutes from downtown Austin, and they've won award after award this year for their vintage wine, Super Texan. Super Texan, now available at your local Specs, as a matter of fact, and it is one of my favorites. My wife loves it. We've actually enjoyed it at family functions and get-togethers. I had a member of the Owen Texas football family at the Fan Fest tell me that they love it now. And I told them, don't thank me. Thank our friends over at Flat Creek Estate Winery, not only producing some of the best premium wines on the market, but also their gorgeous venue available for barbecues and wine tastings and wine tours every single weekend. Perfect for a day date with your significant other or a weekend getaway with that very special significant other. That's Flat Creek Estate Winery, flatcreekestate.com. And really appreciate them for sponsoring the winning drive and being part of the Owen Texas football family. All right, guys, we just got an update from Texas Athletics that apparently the Texas A&M game is going to kick off Friday, November 28th at 6:30 p.m. Done.
Let's go.
Prime time, baby. Prime time. Look at, see, Coach already ready. You're already ready to go. All right, guys. I will say this about, do we think, because we know the Longhorns are going to be good. When they play this game, barring some ridiculous disaster, knock on wood, Texas is going to be good next year. All right. Even by the time they play this game, they'll be a double-digit win team or approaching winning double digits. Will the Aggies hold up their end of the bargain to make this a premier matchup? Will they be good next year or this upcoming season?
They will be on November 28th. You can count on that.
That's true. That's just a good point, Coach. I agree. No, I don't disagree with that. You're right. They'll be ready to play on that day. That's a rivalry. Any rivalry games, we already know all the records and all that stuff goes out the window. But do we think the Aggies will be considered nationally a good team? Or, I don't know. Will they even be in a discussion for the playoff? Like, would you think they'd be a good team? What's the range that we're looking at here for the Aggies?
I think they're going to be a good team. I don't know if they'll be on the cusp of a college football playoff appearance like they were last year, right? That game until, I guess, 2 weeks until the Texas A&M game last year, they were controlling their destiny, right? They beat Texas. They make the SEC championship game. They couldn't make the playoff as a result. And then they lost to South Carolina 2 weeks beforehand. So I think they're going to start off well. They always do. And it's like that meme where you see them climb in the roller coaster and then October hits and that ride immediately falls down, right? So you look at this schedule now. They get Florida at home. That's a big one. LSU in Death Valley. That's tough. And then South Carolina is really the only tough game outside of Notre Dame in the non-conference that you really have to worry about if you're Texas A&M. So they're going to have a good record. I think they're going to be a little bit a little bit worse than what their record might indicate coming into that Texas game at the final week of the season. But Coach, you're absolutely right. Come November 28th, it doesn't matter, what their record is. They're going to get up, especially offensively for a guy like Marcel Reed, who didn't score a touchdown last year with that offense. I think he's going to be a little pissed off, and rightfully so. So going on the road to DKR with a chance to play the biggest rival to avenge their game last year, they're going to be playing much higher than I think they ever had the entire season.
Yeah, I agree. The losses I see for Notre Dame, South Carolina is going to be a tough one. At least they get it at home, and they get Florida at home. That's some of the toughest games they get them at home. At LSU, I have LSU that they do have a veteran quarterback coming back, but I'm not sure about that one. That could be a toss-up for them too. So they could have just 2 losses going into that game versus Texas. They could have, if it's a collapse of some kind, they could have as many as 3 or 4 losses going into that game. I think they'll have like 2. Notre Dame, and they'll lose that Florida or that South Carolina game. They could lose both of those games.
I think you got to look at Notre Dame. Obviously, you got to look at Florida, even though they're playing Florida at home. Who knows what's going to happen at Arkansas?
That's the one too.
Because you've got at LSU the next week, and so you let Arkansas sneak up on you. Could be a problem, but I would have to agree with you, Rod. I would say they come into the game with a 2-loss season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unless something goes wrong. Sorry, go ahead, CJ.
I was going to say, if it's Notre Dame and an SEC loss, that means they're probably in contention to make the SEC championship game. So that just adds to what could be the stakes of this final game in Austin. And again, I think it was very similar to last year. They just didn't, hold up their end of the bargain against South Carolina, leading to Texas coming to their place.
Yeah,
we know that their season is going to depend on their quarterback play. It just is.
I agree.
He's going to have to learn how to break through tackles. I mean, the problem with the quarterback last year was he was elusive, he was quick, but he couldn't break through a tackle. You could just shoestring tackle him almost, and he would go down. It'll be fun to see his development, or interesting to see his development through next season if he can reach his potential and hit his stride by the end of November.
Yeah. Texas will play. Texas play a few quarterbacks that can run. We've talked about that. But I agree with you, Coach. That's why he was almost like a basketball player out there. He was quick and twitchy, but as long as you converged on him and there was great pursuit angles to the football, Texas was able to keep him on the wraps. I think he had 1 explosive run in that game versus Texas. But we'll see. But the Aggies will be facing the Longhorns at DKR. That'll be at 6:30 p.m. So you got prime time on that Friday, November 28th. All right. Thank you for that, Matthew. All right. I wanted to ask you about getting to this topic about the running back position for Texas. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I actually sent it to you guys. Interestingly enough, there's been a lot of this conversation about, I think about Longhorn running backs recently. And one of them actually was from, Always College Football. And they were talking about the big year that is expected from Trey Wisner. And interestingly enough, I don't think there's been enough buzz about Trey Wisner. We've talked about it, and Coach, you brought it up the other day that, hey man, as a 1,000-yard rusher, this is a guy that should be on NFL radars, right? 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC. I looked up Pro Football Focus 2026 big board. That's their draft board, basically. They don't have Trey Wisner on the board for the Longhorns. Pro Football Focus also put out, thank you, Matthew, 2026 draft running backs you need to know. They also did not list Trey Wisner at all. They didn't. He's not listed among those running backs. I'm not saying he should be among the top 10 running backs out there. But Texas has a really good track record. We were just talking about draft streaks. They have the longest current draft streak for running backs drafted into the NFL, 3 straight years of running backs being drafted, with Jaden Blue getting drafted this most recent year. And I went back and did the research, Coach, because you asked when was the last time a 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC wasn't drafted. It actually happened like 2 years ago for Missouri. Yeah, he led the SEC in rushing.
Former walk-on.
Yes. It led the SEC in rushing and ended up being undrafted. Schrader was his name.
Cody Schrader. That's
Cody
right.
Schrader was his name. He ends up with I think the Rams right now.
Yeah.
He had 1,600 yards rushing, led the SEC from Missouri, ended up with going undrafted into the NFL. I think the 49ers signed him first. And then I think he bounced around, ended up with the Rams, if I'm not mistaken. But it's happened recently. And so I thought, oh man, there's no way a guy could rush for 1,000 yards in the SEC and go undrafted. Turns out you can. So the question remains, because now we have the news, unfortunate news, that Jonathan Brooks is going to be out for the 2025 season. The Panthers running back, lifetime Longhorn. He's on the PUP list, physically unable to perform list. He's going to be out, unfortunately. And I was having a conversation with someone who said, man, they're hoping CJ Baxter bounces back after hearing this news about Jonathan Brooks. They hope they take it easy with CJ Baxter to make sure that, you don't rush him back, because these injuries can be really, delicate, if you will. My point is a lot of conversation about Texas running backs. Do we think that, because now with CJ Baxter thinking about his injury, Trey Wisner, do we think that Texas has a NFL drafted running back next season? I asked the question again because I thought, oh yeah, of course Trey Wisner is going to get drafted. Now I'm not so sure, actually. I'll admit that. Is it something that Texas is going to continue to keep that streak alive of having a running back drafted? Or do we think that this year will be a kind of a lapse in that streak for the Longhorns?
That's a great question. I want to say yes, but I look at the situation for CJ Baxter and wonder, will he be fully healthy? Will Texas try to slow play it, like you said, Rod? And if you do slow play it, look, you could bring him back week 4, week 5, kind of skip that non-conference and still get a full 10-game season with the way that Texas is projected to face this year. Would that be enough? I would think so. But for Trey Wisner, I start to wonder, because there isn't necessarily a physical attribute that shines. And that's kind of one of those things with the NFL draft that, folks fall in love with the 40. They fall in love with hand size at quarterbacks. They fall in love with the explosivity of, long jump, high jump, broad jump, whatever you want to call it. What's going to be Trey Wisner's trait that has him stand out amongst the rest? Because you just mentioned Cody Schrader, a guy who led the conference at Missouri, a former walk-on, didn't necessarily shine in terms of his physical attributes, but a heck of a player, right? Produced a ton. I think Trey Wisner is going to produce a ton. And I also think he's going to be a guy that teams fall in love with when they interview players. Who's the one guy that you want to bring with you to your team? We talked about it with Barron Sorrell. We heard about Jordan Washington. Trey Wisner is absolutely going to be one of those guys. So that's going to help in his regard as well. But I don't know if that one, kind of just jumping off the page attribute is going to get the attention of NFL teams. So I lean no right now.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting, Rod, to go back and look at how many SEC blue blood programs. In other words, CJ Baxter is certainly going to help, but Jaden Blue, there were a lot of explosive targets around him. Mm-hmm. He wasn't the only one that was obviously making plays. And so if you go back and look at the Alabamas, the Tennessees, the Georgias, the Ole Miss, those guys that have had Florida maybe 1,000-yard rushers, the if I can call them the blue bloods, because I don't know how many other targets Missouri had, big play guys that were a threat, so they didn't have a choice but to give him the ball. We have lots of choices, and Wisner still had over 1,000-yard rushing in the SEC. I just think that carries, in my mind, a tremendous amount of weight. But as you know, you're only as good as your last season. So they're not going to go into the end of the 25 season and say, yeah, he had 700 yards, but in 24, he had over 1,000. I think it's, you're as good as your last season, but he certainly showed what he's capable of. It's just a matter of whether Baxter can come back, and Baxter's going to take some of those carries away from Travion. And so, how is that going to wind up affecting his draft stock?
Yeah. I was just thinking, because I feel like, I don't know, the Jonathan Brooks injury almost made me paranoid about the CJ Baxter injury. Because they've been talking a long time optimistically about, Jonathan Brooks will be back, he'll be ready. And there's always kind of some setback that was unexpected. Then you're like, oh, so he's not playing, he's not going to be available. And for CJ Baxter, I don't want to hear that. I haven't heard any of that, by the way. So everything's going great with CJ Baxter. Sark even said that, but I also don't want to rush it. I don't want to, because I know how special CJ Baxter is, and I know how delicate those types of injuries can be. And you have Trey Wisner as that, that security blanket that you trust, that can provide you, the juice you need in the run game. So I don't know, just randomly some paranoia about the running back position, but all of that got me thinking, I don't know if either one of those guys will be able to showcase enough next season for them to be draftable prospects for the 2026 draft. And then I was wondering, because I'm CJ Baxter, you want to go when your stock is high. I don't know if his stock will be at its zenith in terms of draft stock next season, coming off the injury, and if they want to take it slow with him. And with Trey Wisner, I agree with you, CJ. I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't know if he has an elite trait. Jaden Blue got drafted because he's one of the fastest running backs coming out in the draft class. I wonder what Trey Wisner's elite trait's going to be, other than just being a good all-around football player. And
sometimes that does it, right?
Sometimes that is. That's what, that could be enough. It could be enough. Yeah. That could be enough. But at running back, sometimes that position, though, because it's a valued position and not a premium position, I wonder if overall it will be. But we shall see. I don't know about the running back crop. I don't know about the group he's coming out with 2026. That all matters too. So anyway, I just wanted to get into that conversation a little bit.
That is interesting, because last year I didn't think it was a great SEC year of running backs, going into it. I made the argument, I remember on Twitter about this time last year, you could, kind of list the 10 best running backs going into college football last year. And I don't think a single one of them would have been in the SEC, right? You had a Jaquinton Jackson who was solid. Raheem Sanders at South Carolina, good coming off of an injury. But other than that, there wasn't really one guy, right? You could argue ETN at Georgia was in that conversation. But other than that, it's pretty open. I think that helped Jaden Blue's case, especially when you start comparing, receiving numbers by running backs, receiving touchdowns by running backs, overall touchdowns by running backs. Jaden Blue was up there leading the SEC in just about all three of those categories. That helped his case a lot. So what is it going to look like this year? I think you look at Jaden Ball over at Florida. That's a big-time player. Oklahoma adding Jaden Ott from Cal. And then you look at Le'Veon Moss returning for Texas A&M. Those are three more talented backs than I think we saw it all at any point last year. So when you start to compare those big numbers within the conference, does that help the draft stock or not? We'll have to wait and see, whether that's Baxter or Wisner that kind of get those bulk of the carries or touches.
Yep. And Sark has said, even at Touchdown Club, he wants to get back to running the football effectively, and being able to run the foot, impose their will in the run game. So we'll see. It's going to depend a lot on Trey Wisner's productivity and CJ Baxter as well. All right. Before we get back to it, let's thank another one of our sponsors. Thank our friends over at South Point Dodge. Before we move on here, you can score big today and score an easy extra point this season when you get with our friends over at South Point Dodge. That's right, folks. South Point Dodge, they have over 600 vehicles in stock right now, including that all-new 2025 Jeep Wrangler, folks. It is a vehicle built for adventure. Our friends over at South Point Dodge also offering you the real deal. The real deal includes right now employee incentive pricing. Well, what is employee incentive pricing? Well, employee incentive pricing, simply put, is just you pay what the employees pay. It's just that simple. All right. You get the employee discount with our friends over at South Point Dodge. SouthPointDodge.com is where you can go check out all of their inventory, or you can go see it for yourself off of I-35 in South Austin. And go check out SouthPointDodge.com. No matter if it's a new car, a used car, maybe it's a trade-in, maybe it's a truck or a car, no matter what you're looking for, our friends over at South Point Dodge are Austin's automotive everything. That's SouthPointDodge.com. That's where you get the real deal. That real deal includes the employee incentive pricing. They call it employee incentive pricing, but and simply put, it's the employee discount. You get it, folks, with our friends over at South Point Dodge today. We appreciate them and all their support of On Texas Football. All right, Coach, I don't know if you got a chance to see Sark's interview with Josh Pate, but it was pretty interesting. One of the clips from it really stood out to me. It was about a 45-minute interview, so it was pretty lengthy. And one of the clips, he described being a play-calling head coach. And I thought it was a pretty interesting description of it. And he said, essentially, I'll paraphrase Sark, he described it as for 4 hours, having to make a decision every 30 seconds. That's what being a play calling head coach is like. Imagine having for 4 straight hours, having to make a decision every 30 seconds, and you can't be delayed. Otherwise, that's a delay of game. Yeah, essentially that's what his job is like every Saturday. He loves it, says he thrives in it. Sounds really stressful. You've been a head coach. I don't know if have you been a play calling head coach? Coach, you've done that. Okay, so what do you think about his comparison? Do you agree, disagree? Do you have another kind of comparison to being a play calling head coach and how chaotic it is? Oh, Coach, I think you're muted.
I haven't been a play calling coach at that level, of course, but I was when I was at Coppell, and you have to really trust your staff. You don't have time to worry about what the defense is doing or is not doing, because you have to be with your offensive staff and with your quarterback and your playmakers talking about, and even offensive line. What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What can you do against this guy? What do you think is going to work? That kind of stuff. And just start charting the next drive, on what you think is going to work. So to me, it's just an awful lot of confidence on your special teams and in your defensive staff that you don't have to pay attention to every one of those snaps on the ball. You can focus on what your next series is going to be. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to be a very good play calling head coach. I think Sark has been good at that, been good at trusting his defense and focusing his thoughts and his time on the offensive staff on trying to get the next series lined up as to what they're going to try to do. So that's my view on it.
Coach, I don't know, this might be a pretty, dumb question here, but can you go through what it might look like on the offensive side of the ball when the defense is on the field or there's a TV timeout? What's going on? What's the communication like for the play caller and that of the coaches up in the booth? Are they going over what they saw the last possession? Or
that's the biggest thing. First of all, the head coach has to have a guy in the box that is in his, as we call it with the players, but as coaches, in Sark's inner circle. In other words, guys, whether that's Milwee, I don't know who that is, but he's got to have somebody up there that he could talk to that can say, okay, what are they giving us when we're in this personnel? What are they giving us when we're in this personnel? We're wearing trips, we're wearing doubles, when we're in whatever formation, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? Because they're charting everything upstairs. They're charting every single thing. And so he's talking to those guys nonstop. And then he may go up and talk to Kyle and say, Kyle, what are your guys seeing? What are they thinking about pass protection? What are they thinking about, run game, zone blocking, whether we need to be gap blocking, whether we need to be, blocking down, kicking out, whatever, power game, all that stuff. It's just, you're constantly gathering information while the defense is on the field so that you can go through and, again, set up your strategy for this next series. because as the time goes on, those guys in the box, if they're good, they're starting to see some trends defensively. They're starting to see some things that they feel like we can take advantage of. I noticed, Sark, when we motion the back out of this is what their adjustment is. So I think this would be a good comeback for that if they do it again. And so he's just collecting as much information as he can. And he almost has to be like a computer. He's got to get all that information in, disseminate it, and then get it into a game plan for the next series, because you have a game plan for the entire game.
Right.
Excuse me. But you have to have a game plan for the next series. And that's done through communication.
Yeah. No, it just it just sounded, and it still sounds stressful even hearing you talk about it, Coach. But I imagine that's just it kind of gets to be something that Sark, kind of thrives in. He says it's hard for him to calm down afterwards and after a game, because he gets in this mode where he's almost in the zone, like boom, making decisions. And you can't dwell on the decisions, the good and the bad ones, too long either. I mean, in the middle of the game, a bad decision in the second quarter, you got to move on. You learn from it, but you got to move on to the next one. And hopefully by the end of the 4 hours, you've made more good decisions than bad, and given your team a schematic coaching advantage, strategic, some type of advantage one way or another. But I think you're right about him being able to trust PK. At least you don't have to worry about the defense. Yeah. He trusts PK, and PK has done a great job. Jeff Banks too. Trust those guys to handle their phases of the game too. All right, good stuff there, Coach. I wanted to get your thoughts about that, because I thought it was pretty interesting, the description. I don't think I've ever heard it described like that. And some people question whether Sark should be a play calling head coach. I don't think Sark would want to coach without being the play caller.
I agree.
I do. I think he's that passionate about it. I mean, we've seen a lot of coaches give it up here. We just saw Ryan Day give it up. Plenty of coaches have given it up because they think it's what's best for the team. I don't think Sark believes him giving up play calling would be what would be best for the team. Yeah, because he feels that. And by the way, he's one of the best play callers and offensive minds out there. But there have been a lot of great offensive minds that have given it up because of that chaos that he just described and what Coach just talked about. It's like, no. I want to focus on, the macro and not just, my tunnel vision for the offense. But that's not obviously part of our Sark, his vision for the team. All right. I want to get you guys' thoughts about a piece from Yahoo Sports earlier today. I think it came out actually last night. Nate Tice, who is their kind of draft analyst, does a lot of their draft analysis and breakdowns of college prospects coming out to the NFL. And he covers the NFL too. But he recently did a breakdown of Arch Manning. It really was it's really thorough too. I mean, he had a lot of kind of data points. Basically did his overall evaluation as if he was coming out as a prospect, even though we all agree he's going to stay in college for 2 more years. But he did his blue chip NFL prospect breakdown of Arch Manning. And I thought it was pretty interesting and talked a lot about, his strengths and his weaknesses. But I want to ask you guys, because, this is going to be what people are talking about probably a lot once the season starts. What are the weaknesses of Arch Manning? We talk about his strengths a lot because there's a lot to, highlight about, his skill set. And we've gone over it a ton, and we can do that too. We can relate the strengths and the weaknesses. But what do you think he had to work on, Coach? You got a coach's eye when you watch football. You got a good sample size, 2.5 games, 2+ starts under his belt. What are your thoughts about, what he had to work on? If you were just evaluating him as a QB and not as a Manning necessarily, what did you see that potentially was maybe a liability in his skill set as opposed to all the upside that everybody sees?
Yeah, I don't know that I personally have enough plays to analyze to answer that question, because you've got to see him in every situation. Just off the top of my head, it's pretty obvious he likes to show off his arm and throw it deep.
Mhm.
and he's good at it, but he can't, just throw it deep all the time. So I think it's just taking what the defense is giving him. I don't know that I've seen a big enough core sample from him to know, because when he gets in the game, he's trying to make big plays and make things happen, but he's not necessarily in controlling the entire tempo of the game. So I just don't know that there's enough info to be able to give that a definite answer. But, just the limited time that we did see him, he liked to go deep. We like the fact that he likes to go deep, because we haven't had that luxury the past couple of years with much consistent success. He needs to be able to do that for sure, but he needs to be able to if you're going to throw deep, you've got to keep people honest with the underneath stuff. You just can't throw deep all the time. So that's just the one thing that just, like I said, that stands out to me. But I personally don't have a big enough core sample to say, yeah, this is definitely what he needs to work on. And who knows? It's a matter of opinion. We don't know all the ins and outs of what's maybe Sark's calling different plays when he's in there, different type of plays that suit him better. But next year he's going to have the entire playbook at his disposal and be able to be efficient with whatever Sark wants him to do. And so I think we need to get 3 or 4 games into the season to be able to answer that question with any kind of accuracy.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think, CJ? What are your thoughts? You got anything that you think that?
No, I think Coach was pretty spot on with, hey, you didn't get a lot of a sample size, right? It was only 2 games. You got some change in a few other games, right? But I think that there was enough there to feel some tendencies, right? I kind of liken him to a baseball player, right? When you get up to the bat, or when you get up to plate, are you a George or are you Aaron Judge, right? Trying to hit home runs, but you're also a guy that doesn't strike out a lot. You get on base with some singles, you knock in a couple doubles as well. Like, you're basically an all-around hitter, but that long ball is going to be there, right? Every time you step up to the plate, you have a chance to hit a ball 450 feet. I feel like that's what Arch is. Now, what you don't want is some of the tendencies that we saw last year where, okay, he's swinging for the fence too much. He's going to turn into a Chris Davis. And if y'all remember Chris Davis hit about 150. He hit 40 home runs, but he struck out about 200 times. So he would lead the league in home runs. He'd lead the league in strikeouts, but he wasn't a guy that would hit your singles, hit your doubles, get on base, whatever it is. But I don't think that there's any sort of indication that he'll turn into a D. Gordon, who doesn't hit any home runs. He only hits singles. He only checks down. And that's what I think we saw a little bit last year with Quinn Ewers, and that inconsistency down the field is, hey, okay, where are the home run plays, right? Where are the big shots that stretch out a defense vertically? For Arch, I think that you might have a little bit too much of a tendency to shoot the ball down the field, to go for the home run play, and not take what's given, right? You got a 3-0 count. You don't need to be swinging for the fence there. Hey, take the check down to Trey Wisner or Jack Injuries or whoever is in the flat. Just live to see another down. And that was one of the things, too, for Arch where, look, I love his ability to extend plays with his feet. I think that, there are several plays, one against Mississippi State running for the corner. We know about the 75-yard touchdown against UTSA, but at times no one to live to see another down, right? Sometimes you just got to go first base to second base and wait for that next play to drive you in instead of trying to stretch a double into a triple or a home run, right? So the baseball metaphor is going and going and going. I get it. At some point, it'll be gone. There's my Chris Berman right there. But my point being, we like the big plays. Don't fall in love with the big plays, because at some point, you're going to hit a slump and those won't be there. But you got to find ways to extend the drives, find points on the board, and trust the offense around you.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about he's got to learn to kind of take what the defense is giving him. What Sark always brings up: you never go broke taking a profit. Just take that. It's okay. It's not a. I remember hearing Quinn talk about this, as a quarterback has to learn that it's not a defeat. It's not. It's not. It's not an L. just to take the check down. There are some quarterbacks that there's so much of a gunslinger in them. They consider it, oh man, I'm as defeatist attitude. I lost that down because I took the check down and I didn't challenge it vertical. And you almost have to reprogram that mindset for a young quarterback. It was actually a switch for Arch in that mindset from his first start to his second start. Of taking more of what the defense is giving him. So I don't think that'll be a big thing. It's 420 somewhere. I think the biggest thing we learned about Arch last year is how coachable he is. The mistakes he made against ULM didn't show up against Mississippi State. Exactly. That we just talked. This is exactly what I was talking about. I mean, we saw instantly him learn, hey, to take the check down, the defense is giving him. So I mean, there'll be things that we'll notice. I think he can get better actually throwing screens. I think his the screen game for him, which is a lot of Sark's offense. We're talking about wide receiver screen. You're talking about screens to running backs. I think they need a little bit of work because the timing on the screens is crucial, I guess, for Sark. And on those swing passes, that was actually Longhorn fans, would kind of took it for granted. That was the strength of Quinn. Quinn would deliver the ball on the money. Nobody cared because it was a screen and it was, the swing routes. But if he didn't put the ball literally right there on the money so a guy could get it and run in stride, it would be a dead play. And a lot of times be a tackle for a loss. But he would put it, you remember those plays on Jaden Blue, put it right there on him, defender right there. And to the point where it allowed Jaden Blue not only just to secure the catch, but he would catch it in stride and be able to make a move like instantly. That's something I think he's got to work on. You can't, because you throw it behind the guy just a little bit, and he's got to change his footwork to catch it, and then he can't catch it in stride and can't make that move. I think that's a little bit, but that's just nuances. That's those subtle things about chemistry and continuity with the wide receivers. That's another thing in addition to what CJ brought up about taking the check down when it's there too. So there's some little things. There'll be three. I mean, he won't be a perfect quarterback, but I do think there are a lot of issues that Texas has been having to deal with and having to kind of solve in the last couple of years that I think just his natural skill set will remedy. Like third down, red zone issues. I think he'll help a lot with just his skill set that we may not see some of those. There will be other issues, but maybe not the ones that have bbeen kind of systemic for the offense the last couple of years.
I think we may wind up seeing more of a strategy of setting up the deep ball. Instead of throwing the deep ball, setting it up. Make them take away what you're doing well. So they've got to give up something. So they're going to take away the underneath stuff. And then they're going to give you those shots. And that's when you take them. Look, he's from the greatest family in football history, probably. And those guys are vocal. They're in his ears. They tell him they're a couple of the best that have ever played the game, not even counting their dad. So, plus obviously Sark and Milwee, he's got a lot of people that are very wise, that are very successful. It's not like he's going to go out there and just throw it deep all the time or whatever. He's going to be very well prepared for this season in my mind. And I like the idea of setting up the deep ball with the mid-range balls, the underneath balls, all those things. Make them respect that so that you will have an opportunity to throw a home run ball. Now they have to respect that too. And so now that's when you've got them. Because, if they drop back and take away the deep ball, you've got the underneath stuff. If they take away the underneath stuff, you've got some good one-on-one opportunities outside down the field.
Yep. No, I like that about setting up the deep ball. You're right about that. Because at one point, the defense has to take a risk. But that's why the running game is so important too. Like Texas got to have a running game if they want to be taking these deep shots. That'll create the one-on-ones. At one point, the defense they'll grow tired of you kind of beating them with the depth of 1,000 cuts. Bring that guy down to the box, then you get to take your shot on the outside. Another thing, since we're talking about Arch Manning and his just his impact overall on the offense. I want to ask you guys because, I think I've heard now multiple different takes about who's going to be his top receiver. And maybe you, DJ, you might be the one who's been conflicted on this. Maybe you're the one who switched on me, said it was going to be Ryan Wingo, and now you're saying it's going to be DeAndre Moore. Well, since you're saying Moore, I'll ask. Are you, right? Is that you that switched on me?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I think it might be twofold. I think you might see the most yards from Ryan Wingo, but I think the most catches and touchdowns are going to go to DeAndre Moore.
Touchdowns too to DeAndre Moore. Okay, all right.
Wingo's
Coach,
special.
You feel the same about that, Coach?
I certainly think it's a possibility. I'm just thankful we have those two, and then if we have one more guy step up, whoever that is, then you have the trifecta. Every great quarterback needs a trifecta of receivers that can take advantage of any defensive situation that's thrown at them. And so if that third guy, whether it's Parker, whether I don't know who it's going to be, but somebody else to lighten that load so that those two guys can do their thing. I don't know. It's a possibility, but I'm not ready to go all in like CJ, but as history would probably repeat itself, he's probably right.
Yeah. You got some folks saying white chocolate gonna be the favorite receiver for Arch. Ooh.
But it'll be interesting to see how quickly Emmett Mosley gets up to speed. Because that was a 500-yard guy as a true freshman at Stanford. I think he's going to have a big play in this offense. Whether he starts, whether he swaps with Livingstone, whatever it might be. The one reason, Rod, that I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I like DeAndre Moore here. I think that you're going to see a lot of attention early in the season directed to stopping Ryan Wingo.
I can see that.
Because we've talked about it. That wide receiver class from last year, that true freshman class, as special as it is with a Jeremiah Smith, you got a Cam Coleman, you got Ryan Williams. Well, Ryan Wingo's name's been thrown in there. If you don't think folks are aware of him and what he could do, I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we had Bobby on the show talking about Ryan Wingo is the most physically impressive wide receiver prospect since Roy Williams or BJ Thomas. These guys that were 20 years ago. So folks know about Ryan Wingo. And I think that there's going to be a little bit more of that, hey, where's number one? We got to find Ryan Wingo before the ball snapped. I think that's going to leave a lot of underneath for DeAndre Moore. Yeah,
a lot of love here for Jack injuries. I saw that Frank threw out the tight end from Cali is very underrated. 214 Texas Bronco. The tight end has to be the third wide receiver to step up. Don't forget, last year it was Gunnar Helm, right, that led you in receptions, if I'm not mistaken. I know Matthew Golden was your leading receiver in terms of yards and touchdowns. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Gunnar Helm who led you in receptions with 60. So we'll see. It could be a number of guys. I can't wait to see which one of the receivers kind of ends up being. And I think it could change throughout the season too. Could end up being someone early on, and then we could see someone step up later, just like Matthew Golden, right? Matthew Golden became the top receiver. Thank you very much, Matthew. He became the top receiver in the second half of the season? And those last 6-7 games of the season, he really became kind of ascended into that role for Texas. All right. Thank you, Matthew. We appreciate that. All right. Before we, I know we're getting close to the live stream. I want to ask you guys about the report, and I saw multiple reports that President Trump was thinking about appointing a commission to study college football and look at the predicament that college football is in. Well, it's been reported that Nick Saban is going to be the co-chair on this commission. And also Texas Tech NIL Collective founder Cody Campbell will be also the co-commissioner with Nick Saban, the co-commissioner on this new presidential committee to study college sports. Is this the first step in Nick Saban being the commissioner of college football? Is this it? Is this how it starts? Is this
it feels like it?
It should.
Right. If the president tells you to go do something, it's pretty close.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, hey, you got President Trump's approval. You good.
At least they'll have two different perspectives. You got the guy from Tech coming in who wants to load the players up with money, and you got Nick who wants to try to contain it a little bit. But isn't it funny? I've never really considered Nick Saban a cheater. I don't know that I've ever heard him call that, but I think there were probably a lot of Crimson Tide alumni that were supporting that program that he might not have known about. And so now that the playing field is even a little bit, he's crying foul, you know. And that I may be totally off base, and I probably am. But you just hear too many stories about those McDonald's bags, you know, in the SEC back in the day. And it's just ironic now that it's a level playing field that they don't have the advantage anymore. So I don't know.
No,
you get a sports car in Tuscaloosa, coach, for the price of a Wendy's 4-for-4. So that's not a bad deal back in the day. So I'm with it. It is going to be interesting because, to your point, Cody Campbell doing exactly what I would do if I had $1 billion. I'll be completely honest. I say, all right, you know, go find the coach of my favorite team and say, who do we need? How much is it? All right, gotcha. Click. Do it 20 times, and you got a pretty good team, and he's done that. You know, supporting Texas Tech pretty heavily. And again, with the way that the world has changed in college football, it wasn't too long ago where several Alabama players went into Nick Saban's office prior to the college football playoff and said, "Coach, more money or I'm out." That was the playoff. So I see kind of two ends of the spectrum here. One hates it, one loves it. How do you find a middle ground there? And can anybody get Nick Saban to, you know, bend the knee in an argument? Because I don't see that happening.
Yeah, just to make sure that I get the details correct here. As Nick Saban is expected to be named the co-chair of the Presidential Commission to study college sports, and this Texas Tech NIL Collective founder Cody Campbell, he's going to be the co-commissioner with Nick Saban. So I don't. That's just to get the details right. Thank you very much, Matthew. To make sure I don't say it wrong, but I don't actually know exactly how involved Nick Saban will be, but a lot of people have thrown out, including I think CJ, you've thrown it out there that Nick Saban should be the commissioner of major college football. However that looks in the future, they do need more of a unified voice. And maybe they just need leadership overall. And everybody respects Nick Saban. You need leadership everybody's going to respect and not try to undermine. And Nick Saban is that kind of figure that everybody overall would show that kind of respect to. So who knows? Nick Saban taking on that kind of Mac Brown. I've heard some people talk about too. He should be one of them guys also that should be on this committee. I don't know what. I know Mac is in Austin. Mac Brown will be great on this committee. Like, I mean, you talk about experience and knowing, you know, the ins and outs and knowing, you know, the kind of the dark side of college sports, and also a guy who, I hope Longhorn fans don't take this the wrong way, actually kind of held Texas back for a while because he did not think it was fair to basically have these huge support staffs and to kind of really expand the athletic department just because you had the resources to do it. Matt kept it a little mom and popish around there for a while because he was not into the arms race of it all. Like Nick Saban showed everybody the way, like, no, arms race, baby. Go all in. Even with your staff, you should be hiring more staff if you could do it. Ain't no limit on it. And then everybody's kind of followed that model. So Mac was all about equity and all about, you know, trying to make sure that you do things the right way. I'm not saying that nobody during that time did things wrong, but Mac was pretty passionate about compliance.
I can't help but think about Ronald Reagan's quote when he said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language: "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Hey,
you know, I don't really want the government involved in this, you know, but if that's what it takes to get people that can truly represent every viewpoint on there to work it out logically, I'm all for that. I'm not for having a stacked committee who is just going to, you know, bulldoze their thoughts and their views into action. And I still think that at some point in time, unless they can really get a grip on it, it's just going to divide, and you're going to have the haves and the have-nots. You know, if a lot of the big, you know, blue blood programs don't like what this committee decides or says, what would keep them from breaking off and starting their own league, I guess you could say, which is not healthy for college football either. But
Yeah.
I can see that happening.
Fortunately, I think Texas would be well positioned one way or the other. If this went away, I think Texas would be in good shape. And if it continues to expand the way that it does, it wasn't but about 2 weeks ago where you had a report saying that there was Texas paying $40 million for its roster. So, either way, I think Texas is going to be in good shape here, but I would like to see some regularity. It'll save the headaches for recruits, for coaches, for fans to know that, it's not just about a paycheck at the end of the day. Some kids still do value their school, the institution, the education, etc. But I'm with you. But Coach, I do have a question for you because Cody Campbell, Rod, you mentioned, is going to be the co-commissioner of this committee. He obviously sold his oil company for $4.1 billion. Coach, I know what I'm doing if I get $4.1 billion. I'm going to Vegas, and y'all won't see me again until I'm broke or I own the city. But, Coach, I want to hear what you got. If you sell a company for 4.1, what's the first thing you're doing there?
Looking at, if I'm not mistaken, Campbell was a former Tech Red Raider.
Yep.
And so his loyalty is there. But I agree. I'm going to do everything I can to help my university be as successful as I can within the rules. And if it's still the wild, wild west, heck yeah, I'm buying the best players I can. Yeah. But here's the problem. When the game's over with, you got to get on a plane and fly back to Lubbock because that's where you live. That's not a very good selling point.
Oh man,
he can't stop the dust storms. He can't stop the idiocracy of the Texas Tech student fan base as they try to rock buses when they come into their athletic facilities to intimidate them or whatever.
Coach, I talked to a prospect the other day who had taken a trip to Lubbock earlier in the spring, and I was like, do you drive up there? And he looks at me and goes, I will never do that again. He goes, of course I flew. Like, really? It was a direct flight from where we were? And he goes, we had to make a stop up in Dallas and then fly to Lubbock. But I'll never drive to Lubbock again. I hated it.
Oh, yeah. I've been to Lubbock a couple of times, and I'll admit that, not much to go back to Lubbock for. But I was just covering football. I didn't go down to the party or anything like that. Interestingly, you brought up how much Tech is spending because do you remember where the $40 million number came from originally? I hadn't heard it because now Kirk Bowles has brought it up, and multiple times we've heard, Texas has a $35 to $40 million roster report. The first report that I saw of it was they were talking about an interview with Kurt Cignetti.
Yeah.
Right? The head coach of Indiana. And he's the one that threw out there are a few schools that are spending $25, $30, $40 million on the roster. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he ever actually said the schools. I think he said there were like 6 schools doing it. But I think everybody kind of did, I went to the internet and started doing their own kind of little makeshift research. And they decided that the schools, I'm going to say, I don't know if he mentioned them by name. Maybe he did. I might have to go look it up. Was Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Tech, Notre Dame, and Miami. Those were the schools.
Miami being the OG, right? Go back to Nevin Shapiro. That's who I thought they were going to announce as the co-chair because the initial report, Rod, was Nick Saban and a notable booster. And I was like, Nevin Shapiro's back from Miami. That's not the case, but those 6 schools, I don't think that there's a surprise in there except maybe Tech, but obviously we've talked about Cody Campbell. The others, maybe Notre Dame would be the other one that I wouldn't have expected to have a big tad, according to Kurt Cignetti. The others, I absolutely believe.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, apparently this is the quote I got it from CBS Sports. He says, if you want to be the best, you got to be able to compete against the best, Cignetti said. Right now, understand that is Oregon, Ohio State, Texas Tech because of their oil money. I think Notre Dame's up there pretty good right now too. Miami, of course. So he did mention by name a few schools, and that's where that interview, he said the top of the market, or at least he implied the top of the market is 40 million. And that those are the schools that are at the top of the market. Tech being in that conversation, that's a compliment. I mean, that's a hell of a compliment to be in that conversation. So we'll see. Will it translate to the field and winning games? That I don't know. All right, let's thank our last sponsor of the Anything, our friends over at Von Lane. Before we move on here, our friends over at Von Lane, and we appreciate Von Lane and all of their support of ON Texas football. I encourage you also to try out Von Lane as well. I've actually taken it to Houston to go see family. I've taken it to DFW for business, and trust me, folks, it is the only way to travel between the major Texas cities. Now, you got to get to Houston, you got to get to Dallas, or you got to get to San Antonio or Austin. And like always, it's a toss-up, right? Do you deal with the airport chaos and hope your flight isn't delayed, or do you brace yourself for hours behind the wheel, battling traffic and burning an entire day? Now, there's a third option, and it's better in every way. It's Von Lane. You arrive at a luxury hotel terminal, no TSA lines, no long-term parking lots, just a seamless boarding experience that takes minutes, not hours. You settle into a plush leather seat. You have a hot towel, pillow, and blanket at arm's reach. Your attendant offers complimentary snacks, beverages, and on select trips, a full meal. If you need to relax, you can lean back and enjoy the ride. If you want to stay productive, there's high-speed Wi-Fi and power at every seat. And while you're unplugging or powering through, whichever one you choose, the Von Lane team is monitoring traffic in real time, using smarter routes and efficient detours to keep your trip smooth and on schedule. And now is the perfect time to plan your fall travel. Booking is open through September, so whether you're headed to a college football game, a weekend getaway, or a business trip that needs to be done right, Von Lane makes the journey part of the reward. Von Lane serves Austin, Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, San Antonio, and in the Southeast, Atlanta, Nashville, and Memphis. Visit vonlane.com and use the code OTF25 to save $20 off on your first ride. That's vonlane.com. Von Lane, elevated regional bus transportation. Thank you very much to our friends over at Von Lane. All right. Thank you, Coach. We appreciate all of your experience, wisdom, and the levity as well. Thank you, CJ, for all the great nuggets that you bring in your hard work. Thanks to Matthew behind the scenes. He is the real MVP. Thanks to all of our sponsors, Von Lane, vonlane.com. Thank you as well to our friends over at South Point Dodge and Flat Creek Estate.com as well. FlatCreekEstate.com. We appreciate them. We got one more question. Sorry, CB, I missed your question here. Does Texas have a 1,000-yard wide receiver and running back next season? Last question before we end the live stream. That's good. I'm going to say yeah, just because the season's so long. Do they have, now, will they have both? That is, but I do feel like as long as guys stay healthy, I'm knocking on wood. Because if they do play until, get to the Final Four again, 16 games, that's a lot of games. A lot of games. What are your thoughts, Coach?
No.
Neither?
I don't.
Or just
I don't know that we'll have either. Just because you have so much depth, you have so many targets, you have, if you do, then it's a little bit could potentially be a problem because some guys haven't stepped up.
Okay.
If you can split up those passes between Moore and Wingo and Parker and those guys, and split up the runs between, Baxter and Wisner, it's going to be difficult to have a 1,000-yard receiver and running back. And it could be possible not to have either one, although I certainly hope we have both. But I don't know that I would bet on that right now.
I think you'll get both. And I think you'll do so with a running back, whether it's a Wisner, whether it's a Baxter. Because last year for Wisner, he didn't get more than 10 carries in a game until like week 6, right? And I know Texas played a long time, but sometimes you'll just break a run. And whether it's Wisner, whether it's Baxter, I think you end up, accomplishing that. Texas should have done it last year. Matthew Golden didn't twist an ankle in the second quarter against Ohio State. He gets 1,000 yards last year. Yeah. And again, going back to Matthew Golden, I don't think he was a number one target until Oklahoma.
Yeah.
right? Like after Oklahoma. So if you get a guy early on, a Ryan Wingo or DeAndre Moore, who is kind of that surefire guy for Texas and is treated as such for a duration of the season, I have no reason to think that you can't get 50, 60 yards per game. If that's how many games that you're going to play, you only need 62 yards per game to accomplish 1,000 yards. So when you look at it that way, I think you can check that box off. If you go for 180, hey, there's 3 weeks worth. And that's kind of where Trey Wisner kind of built up some of that catalog was against Texas A&M, the big runs against Oklahoma. You know, he had some big games after not showing up for the first half of the season. You just got to have a few big games stack up. And I think it'll be simpler than just looking at it holistically as, 1,000 yards, kind of tough.
To that point, CJ, there were a couple of games, even though Trey Wisner got a later start to becoming the workhorse back for you or your featured back, and then you got not shut out, but pretty much your run game got shut down in a couple of games. Georgia, Arizona State, Ohio State, I guess Georgia again. So you had a few games in there where you didn't break many runs, if any. So to your point, it does seem if you play a lot of games, as long as you do have that same kind of baseline of productivity in most of those games, that you can creep really close to 1,000 yards. So I'll split the difference. Coach says none. CJ says 2. I'll go 1. You get 1,000 yard receiver or running back. You don't get both. All right. Thank you guys for the questions and your participation. Really appreciate you guys. And thank you to Matthew behind the scenes. He's the real MVP. And for Coach and for CJ and for Matthew. Until next time, I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Hook 'em horns.